Hello and welcome to the Wet Cement Press Kitchen Table Reading Series. I'm Thoreau Lovell, the publisher and one of the editors at Wet Cement Press, and I'm here in Berkeley, California. The other editors are also both on the line, Michelle Murphy in Reno, Nevada, and Barbara Rother in Asheville, North Carolina. So today we're celebrating the publication of Without Dragons, Even the Emperor Would Be Lonely by Ninso John Hai. And this is a book of inzos, which are Zen circle paintings and handwritten poems in the form of koans and parables. And Forrest Gander, the winner of the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, has said of the book that the hurricane's eye of feeling, whirl inside whirl, world within world, in John Hai's lush color incantations, hang like moons over the road of his handwritten words, and their moments of attention come alive within us as though we were all nested in each other. And Uche and Nduka, who's going to be joining us in a few minutes, and whose new book of poetry, Facing You, is just out on City Lights, wrote, on an elemental level, John Hai explores the intersection of upheaval and serenity. This is a beautiful book for our perilous time and beyond. It makes me jump for joy. I can't be sure, but I think Uche's comments may have been part of what encouraged John to turn this event into a dialogue or a conversation and not just a straight reading. A discussion about how the contemplative practices contained in Without Dragons, such as meditations, inzo paintings, and poetry, can resonate in the current political landscape. In fact, I just got a text as I'm speaking of, election updates. So you can't escape this, that's for sure. John has gathered a group of friends and colleagues who work within a range of different poetic traditions and who have various perspectives vis-a-vis the Zen practice for an intimate exchange and offering to the audience and to one another in these troubled times, and to reflect on how we personally relate to poetry in the world we inhabit. I think that's my part. I'm going to hand it over to Barbara Rother, who's one of the other Wet Cement Press editors, and she's going to do the introductions. Take it away, Barbara.
Thank you, Thoreau. First of all, thank all of you for joining us. I feel like as we talk about politics that this is actually a political act in and of itself, that we're gathering here tonight and discussing poetry and Zen and mindfulness and places we all come from, and that if we all do more of this, our whole national dialogue will be elevated, which is what I'm hoping for. So some of you know each other, some of you may not. I have the pleasure of introducing each of you briefly. Please go to all the authors' websites and look a little more in depth at what they've been doing, because I don't want to shorten the intros or lengthen the intros too much, sorry. So Zen monk, translator, and poet Ninso John Hai is the recipient of many Fulbright fellowships, several NEA grants. He's, sorry?
Okay,
sorry,
Barb, just keep going.
I had a strange glitch. He's currently working on a project translating Osip Mandelstam's Veronese notebooks. John's had a long involvement with Russian literature and translation. He's the former director of the Long Island University Brooklyn MFA program, and has been doing a lot of work in Cambodia, China, and Portugal in facilitating workshops in creative transformation of various kinds, along with Andrea, who's doing the same thing. And someone I've just met, Omotara James, is a writer, editor, and visual artist. She's the author of the chapbook Daughter Tongue, and her debut poetry collection, Song of My Softening, which is such an awesome title, is forthcoming from Ellis James Books. And it's just been announced that she's a 2020 Artist Fellow in Poetry at the NYSCA, an acronym I don't really know, and the NYFA. Omotara is a Nigerian heritage, as is Uche today. So it's lovely to have this rich multicultural representation. Andrea Clark Libin is the author of Orphan of the Moon, Notebook of a Girl in a Moscow Station, which was brought out by Wet Cement Press this fall. Her work has appeared in many publications, Poetry Northwest, Paris Lit Up, and many others. She was a graduate of Columbia and has taught at Columbia. She is a New Yorker, and she has been working with John, as I said, on projects in Cambodia and elsewhere. Wet Cement Press publisher and editor, and my dear friend Thoreau Lovell, is a poet and prose writer in Berkeley, where he lives with his wife, 2 daughters. He's the author of the Wilson Wiley Variations and Amnesia's Diary by Ex Nihilo Press. He's a graduate of School of Information and Management at Berkeley. He has his MA in creative writing from San Francisco State, where he worked for many years and where I think he met John and other people who are here tonight. Uche Nduka is an itinerant poet and professor. I love the word itinerant. I often use that myself. Living in Brooklyn, though you're not living in Brooklyn, you're in Bainbridge, Washington, right? Born in Nigeria, raised in both Igbo and English, immigrated to the United States in 2007. And I guess worked with John to get his MFA from Long Island University. Did you 2 work together there? Yeah, you did, okay. Uche's book, Facing You, is just coming out, or has it come out already? Uche, it's just out, I'm sorry. Has just been published by City Lights, so that's an exciting thing. His work's also been translated into German, Finnish, Italian, Dutch, Romanian, many languages. Christopher Sawyer-Lauçanno is the author of more than half a dozen books, including biographies of Paul Bowles and E.E. Cummings. The Continental Pilgrimage by Grove Press is a group portrait of American writers in Paris after World War II. Sounds very interesting. I'd like to see that. Well known as a translator and poet, his book of poems, include Just Words, Homage to Roman Jacobson, and Remission, and Musuri Montague Miscellany, both, I don't know if I pronounced that right, both from Talisman House. So all of these incredibly various and accomplished writers, welcome to all of you. I'm so looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. So John, do you want me to go ahead and share the screen for the parables you're going to read? Why don't you unmute yourself?
How's that?
Yeah, perfect. Give me just a second. Okay, and let me see if I can make you a little smaller. There we go. And make this a little bigger. All right, there we go.
Oh, okay, great. Boy, that's beautiful. Wow. I mean, listen, Wet Cement Press, you got to give them cred here. They're doing just extraordinary work in terms of not only the look but the feel of the books that they publish. And I'm really honored to be a part of that. Before I begin, I just wanted to say a few words. It's a kind of apropos and curious that what we had planned with my friends to happen back, I think in May or June perhaps, that we decided to postpone because we felt it was important to stay still and let our voices be a part of the uprising in the river of consciousness that was happening and is happening and hopefully will continue to happen at least for a week from now. When we see some regime change here, that's the prayer, that's the hope. But what we do is, throw ourselves into it. And I say it's somewhat auspicious because, as it turns out, unplanned, this past week, I, with Andrea, have been in a week-long silent meditation. So it's a little strange right now to come here, but I'm so thrilled to see the faces and names of you who are on the screen there. And then in terms of each one of the people who you just heard a little bit about, while meditating over the past several days, and when you're sitting in silence, every kind of thought you can imagine goes through your head, and that's just fine. And I certainly don't have any problem with it. I just watch them and hear them and watch them pass. But one very profound one was that the book that you see in front of you on the screen there would not be possible without any of the people who are participating tonight. And it's not hyperbole. It's not just that you each have inspired me with your writing, which would be enough, but the way you've chosen to live your lives in terms of your commitment to change and social justice and to finding beauty in the midst of suffering and to overcoming your own struggles, as I think we all are trying to do, and that are accentuated in this period of really a deep oppression and suffering for so many people, but finding what beauty and joy is there. So I'm going to read a few parables, and I'll begin with they're rather short, but just to get some of the energy of the language out there, I'll begin with parable 1. The boy plunges into the hand, and the hand speaks. The sea swaying in the sky, and the brush teetering on the edge of a hand. You think you know what it means, and you never really need it to know. A sea miraculous in its own language, and translating itself without words. A mango tree hearing the sound of brush. So many hours in this place, and the calming, listening to the girl's lips moving by the pagoda. A dog sleeping by a stone dragon near the gate of prayers. The boy thinks, this is an ink drawing I will find when I get old. He smells the whistle of the cicada from the forest and moves the hand across the page. And for a moment, there is no sound. Parable 9. As you were departing the island, the fisherwomen in the fishing boats suddenly appeared. A body's embrace of water when you spotted the waving of hands by the shoreline. Already the terrain of the pagoda slipping back, a sparkle of turquoise mirroring from the stone dragon architecture, reaching its way back into the water that stretched out and beyond the boats floating willfully. You sense this like moving maps or an immense sea. Though true, you had no idea where the boats and the fishermen were going, much less where you would go. And it seemed these figures were ready to carry you on their backs above the water. Yet surely, you thought, this must be an act of their own imagination. The mute girl and one-eyed boy already on a boat, casting nets into the waves as the fish that accompanied you earlier swam about as if wanting to enter and play around in the nets that could not catch them. A choral sounding of whose eyes from the reefs? Perhaps the trees in some form of echoing, "Oh, captain, my captain." And then remembering you had heard this voice as a boy, and it was leading you on in a return to the world of language. And finally, I'll read parable 10. There was the winter ahead and the winter behind, and soon you would walk again in the snow. The mango trees in a grove, the gravel path into the rice paddies, a station here, a train there, and yesterday's sea already a memory of remembering. And who was the undying person in the waves? The boy and girl on a wooden boat, those fish innumerable as the white sands. Did you really think it meant something other than just this? You have left the trains and the fisherwomen who brought you here. But do you even know where that is? So many questions as you walk by the schoolyard. So many passengers dispersing along the roads. The question appears and disappears. The ripe bananas those villagers near the station shared with you. There was a time you needed to know from both the living and the dead. Today, the sky seamless. The not knowing, perhaps more intimate. The seen and unseen merging together as you rejoin the world in word with all the walkers, talking and going wherever it is they go. It is enough, you think, enough to be alive right here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Am I muted? No. So I hope it wasn't too distracting showing the images. I rather enjoyed it. We're going to shift to what we hope is just a kind of free-flowing conversation amongst the participants. And I'm going to try to get things going by asking a question to Omotara. But anybody can jump in and answer this or respond. It's not really an answer kind of question. But anyway, Omotara, John mentioned that you told him that you found a kind of empathy in Without Dragons, the book Without Dragons, that felt like a counterbalance to all the craziness that's going on in the world, both political and social. So I'm wondering if you could say a few words about that whole sense of empathy as a kind of counterbalance to what we're going through, and how that maybe you feel that in the book in any kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still processing that your words, John, and this book is so beautiful, and I feel like it holds so much. It's really an offering of loving action. And what I guess where I would start is just even in all, being here together in this Zoom universe together, there was a memory that came to me as you read, as I was listening to your voice, which was of I had the privilege of attending Quaker school for most of my education. And on Thursdays, we would have meeting for worship. And on Thursdays, we would go to the meeting house and we would all sit in silence. And there was no formal structure for meeting for worship. We would sit in silence. And then when someone felt that they were moved by the Spirit, they would stand up and speak. And what that gave me as like a child was this understanding of sound and silence, and how really speaking is a result of silence. There's not necessarily a binary, but it's all connected. There's an invisible bridge. It's like very cyclical. And I feel like when I am reading your work, your words, it's not a breaking of the silence, but it's that moment right before someone stands up with something to say in which they're moved by the Spirit. And that is what I feel is held in this work, a deep, deep empathy. I have been listening to some meditations, but I've also been teaching, and I'm so grateful to be someone who's able to teach from home, to teach remotely. And I was talking to my students, and I'm always asking them about process, which is something I really feel I got from you. I didn't really think about my process in that language when it came to writing before I sat in class with you at LIU. So that is something, just, thinking about yourself within the greater picture of a writing community, I think is a gift. So I was talking with them, and I was saying, right now, obviously, is a time of deep stressors, of deep concern. There's this kind of transition, layered transition in the air, whether it's the election, whether it's something personal that's happening. And that is exactly what takes us out of the present, right? When we're waiting, when we're anticipating a result and outcome. So when we think about the work that we want to do, the words that we want to add to the zeitgeist, to all of this stress, to everything that's so tangible, all of this deep, deep yearning for change, for transition. How can we do it in a way that's thoughtful and that leads to a loving action? If what is the place and purpose of our work if not to lead to a loving action? And so when I was, reading your work, especially at the beginning, the cones, I was struck by one of them on page 13. I don't want to put you on the spot, Thoreau. I don't know if you can bring it up, share it now, or it's fine either way. But I'll read it. So it reads, "The body speaks when you hear it. You awaken in the dream, and the dream vanishes. Then we can travel in the dream world freely, freeing others. Freedom is none other than this." And of course, immediately when I heard that, I thought of the Toni Morrison quote, which is, "The function of freedom is to free others." And I think that is the spirit of empathy. So now I'm making that connection between freedom, empathy, and when I'm thinking about all the anxiety that we are holding collectively and personally, you know, all of this anxiety, how much of it is for ourselves and how much of it is for our neighbor. And what I think we're seeing being played out literally day by day is this preoccupation with fortune rather than freedom. And fortune and privilege are things that we protect no matter what. And when we do that, that is the definition of greed. And so greed is the annihilation of empathy. So this book is really a loving action and an occasion to return to that empathy, to return to this idea of it's not what we have, it's what we are. And what we are is enough. And we don't have to wait for someone to put us into touch with our agency. It's already inside of us. So I think, I don't know how other people are encountering the koans and the parables, but that's really what comes to mind for me, especially just, you know, when I see the circular, you know, the Enzo, it's that it's all connected. It's not freedom versus oppression. It's all connected. There's a bridge, and we are that bridge. And when we forget that, then how are we supposed to free anyone else if we're not freeing ourselves? So that is definitely something that is weighing on me, and something that I'm interrogating and trying to figure out for myself, because I don't have all the answers. But I know that when I go to the page, it's definitely an act of survival, but also it's an offering, and that is what this book is to me. It's an offering, and I think that's very African. I don't know, you know, about you, Uche, but it's very African. You know, my mom always says, you know, if you're doing well and your sibling isn't doing well, then you're not doing well. You know, that is empathy. That is empathy. And that is what I know. Yeah.
Really true. You know, there's this saying, you know, a Nigerian saying that says, never forget your brothers and sisters. In other words, it's about communion. It's about the communal, you know. I know we live in an environment where the individual is valorized, you know, the individual is king. And then we all end up asking, why are we so unhappy with all our wealth, all our so-called security? Why are we very unhappy? Because, well, I don't think you can eat yourself, you know. You see, you can't really do much, you know, beyond, if you just think that you are everything. That's what I'm trying to say. The way individualism is celebrated and so on. Yes, that's an aspect of it that is beautiful. But if you don't feel that sharing, that you are in the planet to share, and that you are nothing when nobody is involved, then I think there's a problem somewhere. And I don't care where that philosophy is from, whether it's African, or whether it's from the Eastern, or whatever it comes from. All I know is that I don't think that I am self-sufficient. You know, and that's one of the lies of what I discover in the Western world, this idea that you are self-sufficient. I don't believe in it. Until now, coming across, you know, the words of John, I'm beyond his words. This is somebody who suddenly disappears into these jungles of, you know, Cambodia and whatever. What is he doing in the jungles of Cambodia? I mean, he has an apartment in Brooklyn. He and Andrea, you know. Sometimes I wonder, these people are just troublemakers, you know. You suddenly vanish into this culture that is not really yours, a geography that is not really yours, and you say, you know, you're doing something there. You see, we take it for granted, but I must tell you, to me, that is what it means to be brave. And that is what it means to be really human. That you can go and risk your neck for whoever, because you feel they are either underprivileged or they are not being helped in any way. And you just feel in your own little way where you are sitting. Because there is always this impression that before you do anything, everybody has to be involved, you know? Part of what I learned from John and Andrea's actions is that do something that you yourself feel you can. It contributes a lot. Don't just wait until the whole world stands up before you can stand up. I think that gesture to me is very, very what? Tutelary. You know, it's something that we all have to learn from. And it's something I think that we all have to celebrate. You know, I would actually like to read specifically a section from the book, but I want other people to contribute first before I read that section. It's in section Parable 5, you know, page 57. It speaks a lot, you know, to me and this time. And I would like to share that. But I would like to hear other voices if you don't mind.
So John, I'll jump in, follow up on something Uche was just mentioning. The creative transformation workshops that you and Andrea have been doing in Cambodia. Wondering if you can just say a little bit about that. Like what's really, you know, what's at the heart of that and that practice, and how do you interact with the people there? Are you interacting with them in English, or is there always a translator? Are they writing in response to what you're doing through the creative transformation workshops? And then finally, do you see that as a model, maybe, these workshops, for a way that you can bring some of these practices that are embedded in the work in the book into different communities, maybe not just limited to Cambodia, maybe a little closer to home even. So that's just, you know, that's that.
Well, you know, the echo on what Tar and Uche was saying, the creative transformation workshops actually began in university while I was directing the MFA program at LIU, undergrad and grad. And then we had done workshops as well with the Brooklyn Zen Center with high school students, and from there it grew. And so we were doing them in Cambodia, working with these, with students in China. And most recently, maybe not most recently, but in Portugal with young men in lockdown. And you just be totally blown away by the incredible creativity and spirit and heart that comes out. And the work has ranged from being with the kids, particularly in Cambodia, as young as 6 or 7, and with adults, you know, well into life and older. So it's essentially, and Andrea can speak to this too, because she's also done particular work with the Women's Resource Center in Cambodia as well, is looking at how what's happening in our personal lives as well as the world around us is a process, as Tara was saying, and it's a process of recognition what's actually happening in the body. One of the things that that's amazing is that when that's recognized and spoken or expressed, it doesn't have to be spoken in words or in poetry. Usually we'll carry crayons and things of that sort, and sometimes people are on computers, but it doesn't matter. It can be movement, etc. When it's actually expressed, then there's some sort of release and recognition to rewrite your narrative. And really, in the broader sense, to rewrite the narrative of the world, which is that you're never completely free until everyone is free. And at the same time, in order to be of any use to anyone, you have to free yourself. You've got to get out of your chains. You got to get out of your mental constructs. You got to get out of this oppressed feeling, whether it's emotional or political, and usually it's always intertwined. And we have worked with people who are working with real severe political oppression. Not that we don't have it in this country, but where you can't speak, you can't speak. So that's it. And then, of course, just to answer the practical end, usually we're in translation. And usually, although we do not speak Chinese, Khmer, Portuguese, etc., we learn enough to interact and begin and be able to relate. And some language is so intimate. And so if someone hears you're speaking or, mostly making mistakes in their language, they can laugh at you, and they do. They feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And they see that, there's really, you have no kind of superiority over them or anything, that, you can't even speak their language. But they see you struggling with that. And I think it breaks down a barrier or two. And that's good. Andrea, maybe you would, I'm sure I gave a kind of a rough sketch there, but if you feel like adding anything, because although Andrea and I do this separately, and I've done it extensively as a part of the creative writing program that no longer exists at LIU, it's been something that mostly Andrea and I have evolved and developed together.
I think it, goes back to what Omotara was saying about speaking out of silence. So often we do integrate some kind of mindful practice beforehand that includes silence, even with children in a village school, for example, in Cambodia, where we worked for a long time, and they actually really love it. You're outside in nature, and as John said, we have crayons, paper, and often, for very understandable reasons, school, for example, in Cambodia, the government only pays for students to go to school half the day. So the school where we did this was a school in a village run by a guy who was from the village, and it provided school for the other part of the day. And so much of the school program and pedagogy is very structured, and there is space for creativity, but a different, dance and things like that. And then as well, John was talking about the Women's Resource Center, where often there are women who don't read or write. And, this is the legacy of the Khmer Rouge there. And so it's finding other ways, other forms of expression, usually through the visual, and a form of, as John was saying, kind of reimagining your own narrative, retelling your own story, or a possible story. And very much coming from that idea that, you and Uche were talking about in terms of community.
Can I respond to you, Andrea? It's so interesting to me what you were saying about the participants who couldn't read or write. And in working with just students in various parts of the world also, whenever I've instituted sort of a silent practice, a silent mindfulness practice in classes, and have gotten people in the habit of like sitting in silence, it was such a discovery for me to find how what an equalizer that was. How in silence, everyone is exactly the same. Like all of our silence is the same, whereas all our languages are so different, and all our capacities for language, right? Whether it's the actual language we speak or our ability to articulate ourselves, all of that is so different. But when we sit in silence, that's the real equalizer, right? That's exactly, it's not that everyone experiences it in exactly the same way, but there is an aspect of it where we all do experience it the same way. So that's just been such a profound lesson for me, and I just wanted to share how important I think that is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I want to jump in really quickly because something you said there, Barb, you know, made me think about this reality around language, which is quite strange. We haven't been able to understand, and you know, again, Tara had mentioned about spirit and so forth. We haven't really understood why etymologically, in terms of looking at the roots of words, that breath is often translated breath in soul or breath in spirit are the same. Well, in Greek and Latin is understandable because Greek and Latin are so interactive, and so much with the European or Romance languages and Spanish and so forth and French. But then it's very similar in Hebrew. And then I was just reading recently in Chinese. Now, these are languages that do not share any kind of base or similarities, and yet breath and spirit or soul, breath of life, recurs throughout. And I haven't studied this. I've just been, you know, an amateur looking into it over the past many years of studying the breath. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to as well with silence as an equalizer. It's where we're all beginning, and that breath is where that breath is life, and that's poetry, that's art. It's what we're, you know, what we hear, or the way we hear employ that breath or embody it is a better way of saying that. So yeah, silence is breath, because then I'm sitting for the past 4 days and it's just the breath. And of course, thoughts, feelings, physical discomforts, happy feelings, sad feelings, etc., all arise, but they're all arising in a silence and breath that I actually know. I mean, now I'm, you know, kind of getting old enough to understand that they're not unique. They're not mine. That's something that I share. And so then how, you know, how does empathy, to come back to this idea of empathy and action, I always, maybe I can even find it, come back to this Zen master, James Baldwin. It began to seem that one would have to hold in the mind forever two ideas which seemed to be in opposition. The first idea was acceptance. The acceptance, totally without rancor, of life as it is and men as they are. In the light of this idea, it goes without saying that injustice is commonplace. But this did not mean that one could be complacent. For the second idea was of equal power, that one must never in one's own life accept these injustices as commonplace, but must fight them with all of one's strength. The fight begins, however, in the heart, and it now had been laid to my charge to keep my own heart free of hatred and despair. And I think Baldwin and people such as Baldwin were able to affect so much change through their empathy and their ability to work through their own rage. I don't feel that much rage these days. And then Andrea will come in and tell me something on the news, and I will just have a flush of rage that will just, poof, like, that is not possible. And yet, to be able to see that and dedicate one's existence, because my happiness is dependent upon it, and my happiness is dependent upon being able to resist it, and see that and go, no, it's not okay. My rage and hatred will not help anyone, and it sure to hell won't help me. So that's what came up with this feeling around language and silence, and why silence and language are inseparable. They're just not separable, and they depend upon each other. I think that you know, in order to be what's the word? I don't know. In order to be active and engaged and joyful, they depend upon each other. And I'm wondering what you think about that, my old friend Christopher. I haven't heard from you tonight. Are you still there?
Unmute. Now that I've unmuted, I will join the conversation. No, this has been fascinating. I'm going to push this in a slightly different direction. But I think that it's all part of the same. About 40 some odd years ago in Kyoto, I was talking with a Zen monk who was doing ensos. And he said, oh, it's simple. Nothing in excess and nothing lacking. And to me, that's what this book is. It's nothing in excess and nothing lacking. It's also straight out of the Heart Sutra, Form and Void. All of this links into the commentary that's been uttered before, in the sense that if we divorce ourselves from the ongoing reality, the ongoing oppressions, the ongoing tumultuousness from COVID, then we're doing ourselves a disservice because we're lacking. At the same time, to be too overcome by it with the rage, which I feel, and I have to work against. I feel it every single day. That's the nothing in excess part. And so those ensos, which, you know, reflect the Heart Sutra's Form and Void, it's also what we're looking at in a society, form and void. And I'll turn it back to you for whatever you'd like to say about that. But
can I just interject for a moment? Because
please.
Maybe to be the outlier, or maybe not. I think, you know, to come back to what you were saying about, you know, Baldwin and despair. Despair can be dangerous, yes, if it's one-dimensional or two-dimensional. But I think the thing about despair and rage is that they're inextricably linked, right, to joy, yes. and happiness and action and agency. There's that Khalil Gibran poem on joy and sorrow, or maybe it's on sorrow and joy. I think it's joy and sorrow, where, you know, he writes, you know, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And right now, there's such a, you know, underneath this patriarchal sky, there's this emphasis on binary. But, you know, that's a lie. But at the same place, I want to even, you know, put pressure on that statement, because, you know, it is a lie, but also, yes, there can be binary, but then there's this other tension of Enzo, of things that are cyclical, of things that return. And I think that what we're seeing currently in many different places across the world, and also I think what plays out in your book, you know, between the boy and the girl, is there's this idea that peace calls for rage, and rage calls for peace. You can't have one, you can't just have one without really not only acknowledging the other, but calling for the other. The deeper you go into one, there's going to be underneath the surface somewhere roiling some kind of rage. If we're living, if those of us living with certain types of privileges are living in a bubble, essentially, and we're content living in that bubble because, you know, we understand the paradigm of the bubble, we are familiar with it, we have our routine and our practice. There's going to, just because we don't acknowledge what is roiling in the everyday existence of people who are outside that bubble, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And then when that roiling rage, when that sound becomes so loud that you can't ignore it, then I think a lot of what we're seeing now is people having a strong reaction and saying, oh, this time is the worst time. This right now, there's so much happening, and there is so much happening, but it's been happening, and it's been happening, and it's been happening. And that lack of acknowledging and honoring what was always coming for you, the truth is out there, exists, whether you acknowledge it or not. And it is always coming for you. Your truth is always coming for you. It is inescapable. And that's what I love about the Enzo. I think I'll just to take this opportunity to, since I brought up that Khalil Gibran poem, you did ask us to possibly like read a piece of poetry, because too, when I speak to my students, I ask them to investigate, okay, what are you writing? You know, what do you understand as your subject? And then also like what's beneath that? Like what aren't you writing about? Like what don't you want to speak about? Because I know for me as a beginner poet, oftentimes I would want to tell my story without telling my story, you know? And that's kind of like a default that I think that we all have in certain aspects of our writing. So I'm just going to respond with a piece called Said Joy to Sorrow, kind of about this inextricable link that I feel is in discourse with, you know, your poems and your parables. So this is a poem in the voice of sorrow. Said joy to sorrow, what stands between us, the hours, never parted. when you were a soft nothing, molten child, I blew you to bubble, to bulb, to bloom, yawned the paradigm of time into the weak fire of light. I made you synonymous till my knees bowed, carried and hoarded the original ode, tight-lipped, heavy-lunged. Do you remember what you were singing when Khalil renamed you in breath, dressed you in language, adorned you in prayer? When I was the first to suffer, barely blown and bastard, I hushed your hardly husked first flesh, shucked, and finally you. So I think there's always, you know, with every poem, a shadow poem, and with every subject, there's a shadow subject, and that's really where I think this book lives, where this this act of love and compassion is really kind of melding and merging, and it's doing a lot of bridge work, because there's more, I think there's more bridge than divide. And to me, that's the heart of this work. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there.
Well, you know, please let me, I don't want to stop the flow here, but just thank you for that extraordinary poem. It spoke to me very deeply. It didn't surprise me, but it did surprise me. I've been listening to your and reading your poetry for some years, but it just seems like you just keep blowing it out, you know. Just keep getting deeper and deeper, and just like, oh no, you ain't gonna play around with it. You're just going right to it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Uche, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to read just an excerpt from "Without Dragons, Even the Emperor Will Be Lonely." Even there is something about this title that I found both hilarious, you know. Mm-hmm. Why should the emperor be lonely? You know? But I think this is another cone, you know, that's, you know, thrown there in the air for us to make us also think. In other words, without challenges, we are nothing, you see. If we wake up every morning and there is nothing that challenges us, where are the impetus? How are we going to live? Are we just in the planet just to work and pay rent? You know, something's going to do what? Needle you somehow for you to wake up and do something. So I think that this particular title speaks a lot to me on this, before we even enter the book. You know, I've been thinking about it since I got my copy of the book months ago. I'm like, this title is very, very mischievous. But anyway, the excerpt I want to read is page 57 from the section called Parable 5. And it starts with water. It's like, water, you may wonder what it means. Yet somehow you understand, you will never know. Still, you have been here, and that is enough. No one is bothered by your arrivals or departures. And you sense it has always been like this. Bow and wave to the unnamed and board another train as you pass along the way in the book of changes. And what struck me, you know, in those words, a simple word, these lines are simply against pomposity. It says, look at you, but be what? Be humble. You know, others have passed through this way before. You are simply what? A line in a chain. It's not saying be apathetic. It's not saying feel self-pity all the time. It's not saying dance to what? Victimhood and all that. But it's saying, look, just remember that though you think you are unique here, that uniqueness should be tempered. And I like that particular message. And the other aspect of what struck me was the allusion to the Book of Changes. See, I've come across that allusion in Leonard Cohen, you know, some of Leonard Cohen's poems, the Book of Changes. I've come across it in John Cage, you know, and these are artists that moved me a lot. You know, I would call them, now they become all ancestors anyway. So they're ancestors. Cohen is an ancestor, John Cage is an ancestor. And so when I came across that particular line, as you pass along the way in the Book of Changes, John used it as a line, but it's actually a title of a book too. And that's something I find very, very smart to do. You know, how you can be able to embed in the body of a poem things that matter to you. And this is the short form in which poetry educates. You see, poetry educates concisely. It's almost like it gives you these shorthands, these keys, but you need to really be what? Vigilant sometimes to get it. People are always in a rush to understand what is written. I think we should slow down. You know, there shouldn't be an issue if you need to read one poem a week, for 1 week, 7 days. Because a poem, a real poem, deserves that kind of attention. Anyway, I will contribute further ahead, but let's move on.
So I hate to be the timekeeper here, but I think I'm just looking at the clock. And John, I don't know how you're feeling about time. Not in the philosophical sense, but in the practical sense.
What is time anymore? I don't know.
Right. So maybe we should think about wrapping it up. If anyone wants to have a last question or comment, Chris or Andrea, Barbara, Uche, Omotara, John, even.
Well, I would like to ask, what are people doing? Just what are people doing to claim your joy at this time? You know, what is sustaining you? What is feeding you? What is giving you the power to look inwards as we look outside of ourselves and move forward together?
If you don't mind my also coming in, I think that it's individual, you know. You find those things that give you delight. Find those things that nourish you as a person, not just bodily, but spiritually, emotionally. And that can be what? It can be the arts. It can be some martial arts, you know. It can be something to do with whatever it is, because the thing is that we sometimes fail to see how incredibly beautiful the world is. See, this is a beautiful place. We always complain nonstop about it, and we don't stop for a while to actually appreciate the beauty that surrounds us in any way we are. And this is not only physical beauty, and that's very, very important. And the other thing I think in that extent is my own response to Aristotle, for instance. You know, he regards tragedy, right, as the highest art form. I disagree. Tragedy is not the highest art. I completely disagree. Joy is something that is necessary in this world that we live in. And I think that we should normalize joy. You should not feel guilty about being delighted, about being joyful. You should not hide your joy, no matter the environment you find yourself in. Well, that's what I can say for now.
Agreed.
Yeah, here. I think you really said it.
Maybe each of us could respond to that. And
Well,
go ahead. No, go on, Andrea.
No, Chris. Go.
Okay, I think for me, it's the constant kindnesses that I observe coming to me, that I see people giving to one another, remembering that we aren't all alone here on the planet. We aren't all alone, isolated in COVID, that we are ultimately pretty good folks taking care of each other. And that's joy. That's joy. And that's it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be specific, and I'm going to say chocolate, and also making a fall altar in my apartment, because I get outside, but really not as often as I wish. So I did something which I haven't done in, I don't know, decades. I bought a pumpkin, I don't know why, and it's in the middle of my apartment. And I shucked corn and just left it there and brought in, yay, I see Idra also brought in a pumpkin. That's awesome. We're here. Bring out all your pumpkins. And dried flowers. And it just, makes me feel better when I look at them and I'm at my desk. But I also try to get outside for sunrise, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a lot of trouble sleeping lately. But the good thing about that is that I'm usually up when the sun comes up, and I do go outside and I watch the sun come up, and it fills me with an awe every time, because it makes me forget about myself for a while and feel smaller and connected. And that's what I need when I'm too much, when I'm just swimming in too much of myself. I don't know how else to say it, but yeah.
Thank you.
I agree about pumpkins and chocolate and dawn. I think that's the trifecta, Omotara. You nailed it. That's the way to get through.
Let's start the cult.
Andrea, you and Thoreau going to add a word or two here?
I just love everything that everyone said. And, really actually being here right now with all of you is bringing a lot of joy. So thank you for that.
What about you, T?
So I was resonating with this idea of joy and the sense of not being guilty about embracing some of the changes that have been brought on us, and not the best of situations at all, but just to have things of forced simplification and slowing down, and the basics of the day-to-day process, and how there's joy in that. There's joy in sitting down and writing every day. There's joy in walking the dogs. There's joy in meditating. There's joy in figuring out how to feed the family. There's, and these things are simple and basic and often get swept away when there's so many other pressures on us. Not that there aren't other pressures on us, but I'm just feeling like sometimes I don't even want to admit that there's aspects of this that I'm like, this could go on. I mean, not the terrible parts of it, but the simplicity, the slowdown, as Uche was saying, the one poem a week, that could go on, that could get deeper. And I think that there is an aspect of this that we could be, hope to transition to a place where those values were really celebrated and cherished and put to the foreground.
I love that, Thoreau, you're speaking about joy. Everyone's speaking about joy. I've just been writing about how joy is so much the lack of it is the capitalist plot, right? That our lack of being able to just naturally embrace joy is what capitalism is based on, that there's a lack of something that we all need, that we got to get, that's being kept from us, that when we do achieve it, then we'll be allowed joy, right? And it's like an old hippie thing, you know. I was writing about this like in the 70s, really. This was like the hippie motto, like, let's embrace joy. But they were right, you know, that was not any different than it is now. And so it just has always resonated with me, that sense. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And also what you said, that because I live with the journalist and we're also swimming in the news, I think that it's really important to see the news as a part of an oppressive system. You know, not that it's not true what they're reporting, not that terrible things haven't been happening in this country for hundreds of years. All of that's true. And what I try to do is sort of somehow place that in reality. Like, as many of you do, see someone I can work with, or see a student I can talk with, or see someone in the grocery store and talk to them about wearing a mask or whatever, but to try to put it in the real world. That's all.
Well, you know, it's not much to add to everything that's been said, because it's been so, you know, spoken from the heart and so well articulated with both passion and intelligence. And I think passion and intelligence are, you know, good combos when we can make it happen. If we can make it happen, that's really good. That's helpful. But dragons are all around there, you know, and you know, the title's a little mischievous, as Uche said. It's a little humorous. It's a little embarrassing, actually. But I felt like that was a good way to go, because I feel that I've been kind of fishing around here, and I see on the speaker view the various faces and hear voices, etc. And I know, I mean, I'm not at all, this isn't a quagmire for me, that each of you are dragons, and you're dragons in my life. And our friends, sometimes visible, sometimes invisible, sometimes dead and not gone, sometimes family members who we know are still in our heart, and maybe more than just in our heart. And then people who we're just interacting with each day, as we are interacting right now. And I know we're over the time limit, and then so we must be saying something right. And so being able to look around and say, whoa, you know, that's a dragon, and I'm really, I thought I was lonely, but you know, I'm actually okay, and that's because of these people who are around me, who are giving me, inspiring me, giving me courage. Or when I'm filling up, I can help them, and when I'm not filling up, they help me. And we are dealing with a lot. There's just no if, ands, or but. There's no, you know, there's no kidding around about it. But it's always been like this. It's always been like this. And human beings, and not just human beings, but we've always dealt with things. But we cannot do it alone. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah, capitalism is, you know, has created some sort of grand illusion. And Sasha, yes, Marx was right. Anyway, I've been very grateful to hear your voices and to feel the passion and dedication to just, you know, doing the best we can in our lives. And I'm very grateful for your kind words with the book. As I said at the beginning, it couldn't have happened without each of you. And then you and I and we whether we're writers or not, all have our own books, because that's just what authenticity is. We're the authors of our own lives. And sure, they're full of struggle and problems, but we are the authors, and we get to write them the way we write them. And that doesn't mean that there's not suffering. It doesn't mean that there's not struggle. No, 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 no. There's no Pollyanna in here. But at the same time, it does mean that we write the book we're living. And I hope that each of you will enjoy the book as you've helped me to enjoy this one.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thanks to all of you. What a beautiful event. I miss you.
Oh, miss you all. Great to see everybody, and interesting conversation in the chat.